My name is Rudy, and I have, among other things that I've done, from being a building principal to a teacher, I've also been the chancellor of New York City Schools. I've been superintendent in Sacramento, superintendent in Tacoma, and now I work for the Stepsky Family Foundation as a director of school reform.
Do we have lower expectations for some groups of kids than others?
Absolutely, we have low expectations for some children by compared to others. In my experience, it's been easy to discern the notion that we do have very low expectations for children of color, for children whose first language is not English, for children who are born in poverty circumstances. We don't understand them. We actually quietly assign them a different social value. We teach to them differently. We provide schools and other resources very differently for them and for their communities. And again, in a very quiet way, we transmit to them the notion that your brain is not nearly as powerful as the brain of other people. We don't have to build it as much. We don't have to be as rigorous in what we do with it as we do with other children.
You said we teach to them differently. What did you mean by that?
What I mean by the notion that we teach to them differently is that we actually, unconsciously in most cases, do the kind of teaching that is aimed at a very low level of development. We actually assume that good teaching for them is that they can remember, they can respond to phrases in ways that would complete them. We give them assessments that are not aimed at asking them to think, but rather to sort of manipulate what is already in front of them rather than to create what doesn't exist. We don't really know that the brain we're talking to, that happens to be poor, or happens to be black, or happens to be without English as a first language, is as capable of being anything across the spectrum of life that you and I could be. So we actually dumb down what we do and how we do it, how often we do it, with what level of rigor we do it. All of that is a very different combination than we do with other children whom we assume to be quite bright.
And what happens when we do that, when we give them a dumbed-down curriculum year after year?
When we give children a dumbed-down curriculum year after year, we actually do convince them that they're really not very smart, and that this is essentially what they were assigned to be able to do. And the fact is that we should be happy that they've done it. And they should be happy that they've done it. And we should actually celebrate their mediocrity. And they have no sense of what is on the horizon in terms of what other possibilities, what other options for learning, at what other levels they could have gone to. Oftentimes they get that information quite indirectly. But the fact of the matter is, we are saying to them that you should be happy being assigned the status of being a quasi-learner, not a full-fledged learner, not a person who has the capacity to actually do far beyond what we've been able to do with you here. But in fact, you should just be happy to have met the minimum standards, maybe or maybe not graduate, but you tried very hard. We love you to death. We feel real good about you, on and on. Just not enough. All the love in the world is not going to compensate for, frankly, very good teaching.
Turn all that around and tell me what you do in a school that has, where everywhere you look you can see low expectations of the teachers for themselves, low expectations on the part of the faculty for the kids.
I think what happens in turnaround situations, that is to say where you walk in and you want to turn around schools where you see those low expectations, and you see behaviors that sort of mimic the low expectations attitudinally. I think what first has to happen is that people actually have to be confronted with the reality of the inconsistency between what they say they believe and what they're actually doing. And the best way of, in my mind, doing that is actually to sort of give them objective data that they can't throw stones at, that they can't say was somebody else, or they can't say was, you've been sent here by the superintendent to beat me up. This is really about us. And this actually has to be a point where there's not easy denial. And that's the first point. Data is very powerful in this context.
Now, are you talking about data that shows the kids aren't learning, or data that shows that they can?
Data that shows that they can learn, and data, frankly, that shows who's not learning. That in effect, when people are able to look at data that essentially says, here's what's happening for the larger population of our district, and then here within that, here are segments of the population for whom even the highest levels of achievement, there's no representation of. There's no representation of many of the children from our school, for example, or from neighborhoods that are represented by the children in this particular community. That's powerful information. These are not refutable objective performance data sets. These are things that people actually live with every day, and they know them to be true, and so forth. The other thing that I think has to happen in these moments is there needs to be a constant sort of inbounds, out-of-bounds reality check. That is to say, it's not inbounds to say that it's just about these children coming in our schools. It's not an okay explanation to say that the scores or the abilities here are a function of just having the raw material, the worst of raw material coming our way. Oh, woe is us. We just have the wrong kids. In point of fact, what is inbounds is, what are we doing? What's the nature of our work? How have we actually executed that work? Where has it gone very well and where has it not gone very well? It's the business of actually making this an architectural question, a design question, and people can then contribute to the ability to understand the architecture of their school or of their classroom or of their teaching very differently, and they can attend to it very differently.
If thinking about these issues from the standpoint of the school principal, what is the most important task for that principal?
In thinking about this whole issue as it relates to a principal, probably the most important thing that they can do is dedicate unwavering commitment to the notion that these children, taught by these teachers, can achieve at a very high standard. The demonstration of that, the very fact that this is in the belief of the leader, that it's endemic to him or her, is the cornerstone of building confidence for people who are shy, frankly, about believing it in themselves. And that means the teacher corps and, frankly, the rest of the administrative team.
And if that's right, doesn't it follow that it's a key part of the principal's strategy to create situations in which teachers find their kids doing things they didn't think they could do?
The core assumption here is that if, in fact, teachers see children doing things that heretofore they didn't think that they could do, then the need is for principals and frankly for others in administration to actually create the context in which that happens over and over and over enough that people believe that it's the norm, not the exception. And the real issue is how to capture those moments when children and teachers literally are looking at each other, or for that matter, when principals and superintendents are looking at each other, and they are having these moments of aha, and they are over having exceeded the expectations of one or the other.
I've heard you, Rudy, on a number of occasions talk about the importance of the social and emotional development of kids. What do you mean by that?
By the social and emotional development of children, I simply mean that their sort of sense of adequacy as it relates not just to their own academic performance, but really that there are other realms. And the other realms for me include how they see themselves in relation to the ability to be a member of a civic world, of a community. How do they understand that? How do they understand the rules of engagement? How do they learn it? To what degree is anybody paying attention to their EQ in that? How do they see and develop ways by which to choose alternatives and make sensible choices within that context? So that's one area. A second domain of this really is that I'm also interested in the ways by which they make sense out of their own occupational adequacy. How do they see themselves as a member of the economy? Where do they fit? How do they get there? And the last one for me would be really how they see themselves personally. How do they understand their worth? Are they simply no more than a Nike swoosh and worth that? Or frankly, if they don't have it, they're not worth that? Or in fact, do they have some other intrinsic core value that they carry with them all the time, independent of whether or not they have the accoutrements that might suggest their worth or power?
Talk to me about this sense of worth, personal worth, in relation to academic achievement. What's the relationship?
I think that the relationship is that if we're trying to identify ways by which children demonstrate their proficiency, their capacity, that they do it in various realms. They do it in many cases by virtue of their academic realm and the work that they do there, and they also do it in other realms. They do it in their own social realm. But they have to find some place within which they are comfortable and confident in being able to demonstrate that they are presentable to the world, that they're good in the eyes of the world, that they're powerful, that they have stature, that they have standing. And they look for places where they can actually do that. Getting an F on a test may tell one that, you know what, I don't have standing in math. On the other hand, being able to know the latest dance step or to know how to do something in a social environment offers them good evidence that they do have some real moxie in that world. But nonetheless, they look for it in either of those two worlds, and the real issue is how do you blend it so that success in one transfers to success in the other.